Welcome to Spectrum Perspectives, real talk with parents, professionals, and autism advocates, with your host, Cindy Gellermini.
Hi, everybody. This is Cindy with another episode of Spectrum Perspectives. And we are recording this in the month of October, which is Bullying Prevention Month. And you may have noticed if you listened to the earlier episodes this month, there were many different perspectives and different stories, but you may have heard about bullying and in some of our episodes. So I wanted to bring on a professional to discuss this subject of bullying, especially in the autism community. So I brought on Candice Duggar. Hi, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Cindy, for having me. This is a topic that I just am incredibly passionate about talking about. It's part of our family ministry, but not just in the bullying aspect. I think so many of us, whether we're in the autism world or not, this is an issue that is exploding in our current culture. So thank you for having me here today. Yeah,
it really is in all over our country and, in many
the
different
world,
ways.
Right?
It's our world is just getting more and more tense, and people are getting more and more angry and more vocal. And
Yes.
And social media, I think, is it's a big part of it. And I just quickly will tell you, I was on the Today Show April 2nd for Autism Awareness Day. And they did a beautiful interview and story on me. But before the story came out, I was panicked. I was in such a panic because I was so afraid of, did I say the right thing? Did I say something wrong? Is somebody going to get upset? Am I going to get bullied online now? Are they going to rip me apart on social media? Like all those thoughts started going through my head. It makes you just...
It makes you crazy.
Yeah. And it's made me
anxious.
really, I have felt myself, many years ago, I always felt that I was called to do public speaking and things like that. But the climate of the way things are now, it makes me really step back and say, do I really want to do this? I don't know if I really want to do this.
So our family, and I'd love to share with you a little bit about that, but our family was actually approached about doing a reality TV show, The Other Duggars, because we homeschool, right?
Mm-hmm.
That perspective. And I remember being on the phone with a PR person, and I look outside my window, and I'm my son on the spectrum who is getting on his little motorcycle with his little helmet, and he's got two little ducks in a dog cage and a little lamb on a leash. And I'm going, I don't really think we need a reality show. I bet there's a lot of content here, but and so I'm like, hold on a minute. And I open the window. He's like, well, I have to walk everybody. And I'm like, the sheep they don't need a walk. The ducks are fine. He's like, but how are they going to get exercise? And he takes off on his little motorcycle. And I'm like, yeah, we don't need a reality show because my kids, we're public, right? We talk about my children's mental health. We share with the world what we feel comfortable sharing, but I don't need people digging behind that and creating more angst and mental health issues for my kids, because we do live in a world that, we choose to homeschool. We choose to do it differently. People judge that for what it is itself. I have children on the spectrum. They give you your opinion. People want to give you their opinion on everything, right? So I don't need more of that in my world. So I completely understand that. And to this day, we've gotten a call. I feel like every few months, and I'm like, nope, we're still in the same place. I'm feeling good about the reality show. Yeah, I think it would have to be something that we had the rights to put out. We showed what we felt comfortable with and manage that versus giving production rights away. So
I don't think they let you do that if it's someone else's show. It's different. See,
I
control my own content here. Nobody can tell me what to say or not say, right?
Yeah.
So you have two children, you said?
I do. I have two boys. I always, I still keep this little photo.
How old are
I don't know
they?
if you guys can see that. They're right now they're 13. I know it's kind of glary. 13 and 18. My oldest is getting ready to graduate.
Okay.
We started this journey. My youngest is on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
He is actually has come so far. I really look back to where we began and where we are today, and the joy that it brings me to see him stepping into himself, even as a young man, just brings me so much joy. Our story sort of started, I started doing the work that I'm doing in bullying when I actually almost lost my oldest son, the one I'm graduating this year, to suicide due to horrific bullying. And he was in traditional school. We were going to the schools trying to get help. All of the information is go to the school, go to the administration, go give your power away, really, and somebody else fix it. And at the end of the day, that was putting my son's life in so much danger. And he had dyslexia, he had dysgraphia, he had dyscalculia, he had ADHD, he had the whole spectrum of labels except for autism. I feel like we had all of that. And they kept putting him in classes where all he was doing was focusing on what he could not do well. You
Mhm.
compile that with the bullying, you compile it with coming home, things I didn't really understand in Gen Z bullying, from the gaming bullying and the cyber and that 24-hour cycle and its impact on our youth's mental health. And it just broke his spirit and will to want to live. So we made the choice to pull him out of school and homeschool. And I, during that time, left my little guy, my youngest son, in traditional school. And to this day, I still deeply regret that. Christian, my little guy was dealing with bullying, like the second, third grade, but what I would consider what you and I grew up with, right? Schoolyard bullying, a little bit of things, but it was escalating to the point that he had asked for help. He had gone to counselors, he had gone to principals and teachers and was kind of told, don't be a tattletale, that type of approach, right?
Mm.
And because he's on the spectrum, he was easier to manipulate. He doesn't really have a lot of those social IQs to be able to judge the room as easy. He was having his library books stolen and put in other kids' desks and being blamed for not having them. He had his face thrown in the urinal and kicked in the back of the head and
Mm.
scratches marks. And it came to the point, the little boy, and I try to say this without crying, but I hope you understand, Cindy, as a
Mhm.
mom, it's still so raw, even 3.5 years later. That little boy under the bed, 9 years old, screaming at me, I would rather die than go back there another day. And I just remember pulling him out and just embracing him. Like, he is so frustrated because his communication is hard as it is, right? I mean, he can communicate beautifully, but it's sometimes the words don't come as easy. He is frustrated, he's angry, he's exploding more and more. His health was in a terrible place. He was aching up every 2 hours with panic attacks, terrified to eat, go to school, stomach aches, in and out of the doctors, all of these things. The stress on him was horrible. And I remember just wrapping him in a hug and saying, baby, this is it. And I just remember this moment of clarity that there was nothing inside that building that was worth my son's soul ever. We were done because I had almost lost one child to suicide. And so it was very fresh for parents who have struggled with that, sleeping with the door open at night, therapist and doctor's appointments and medicate. You don't know where to turn when there's this darkness. And it almost encompasses. And then to 2 years later, where I'd poured all of this into one child to help him deal with his bullying, his little brother, who I thought would be okay because it's second, third grade, early fourth, like not middle school, right? Like, I think it's okay. And now looking back, they were such formative years for him. There's damage there that I don't know. We will heal. We actually have done lots of therapies to help him along the way. He works with PATH with horse therapies. He's doing an apprenticeship. We ended up getting him an autism support service dog he's had for 2 years. We all kinds of things that we built in that have given him confidence to get back at it. There's still a lot of deep trauma there. And he is terrified to be in groups of other children and can easily size up, right? Even with the work that he does with me, it's been really hard. And so through this journey of seeing how little help there was, I realized, wow, there's so much work that needs to be done, but so little help for parents. There's nothing. It's go to these schools, let them deal with it. Go to any of our top websites. It's not really support and help for how do you help your children heal when so much bullying is happening in your home, right? Because this is, as we said, not a school issue, it's a cultural issue. It is adults bullying children, siblings bullying, right? There's from the playground, from in their communities, from in their churches, from wherever they are, it is all children on all spectrums. And so it's I think we need to start this conversation on a bigger perspective is actually bring real tools to parents so that they know how to advocate for their children and also how to teach their children as they're moving along in this process, because it's not one conversation, right? We live in a digital world. It's a longer conversation for these kids.
Tell us what you do as your business.
Yeah. So I run Bullied, Broken, Redeemed and Reimagine Education Conference. I actually kind of twofold. I first started out helping and I equip leaders, parents, and youth on Gen Z bullying, mental health, and social media addiction. So from training Fortune 100 companies to speaking at parent groups, conferences, really opening this conversation of what does leadership look like in today's world and what do we need to prepare our children to launch. So I write classes and books. I do a lot there. I also run Reimagine Education Conference because so many of these parents, for safety, could not keep their children in the environment they were in. And so we created a community to help them transition out from the beginning for the first 2 to 3 years. So now we've actually gone to every continent, exploded internationally with over 80 speakers, helping families make this transition from dealing with parenting. How do you manage IEPs? How do you find services? And all of these things, so that how do you manage childcare, right? If you have to work, how do working parents do this? How do you find alternative education if the system is not working for your child? And then we teach children, my son is also a published author. He writes books on invisible disabilities and how do you interact with people with invisible disabilities, and my service dog. And so we try to use that platform to help branch that communication gap between children who may have lots of questions, right? How do they make the experience healthy for both people, for the child and the service dog, and for those who want to interact with him without causing more anxiety and stress? And so I have just been honored to do this work and help families and teach children how to really even start their own little businesses and step into their passion projects and to find how they were beautifully and uniquely created.
Yeah. For me, my son, he was severely autistic. He went to a school for autistic children only. I didn't want him in a public school setting because I remembered how the kids were treated when I was in school. I was bullied a little bit, I think, like you said, you mentioned, the typical bullying, but none of it is okay. None of it is okay. It took years to get over that. But, and I don't ever talk about this. I don't think this is going to be the first time any of my listeners have ever heard this, but my father was a bully. My father was very abusive. I grew up in that. And it takes years and years and years of a healing process to get over that, and you find that the way you react to other people in other situations, it affected how I reacted to my husband, affected. And, Joyce Meyer always says, hurting people hurt people. And so it's handed down. It's a generational thing that can get handed down from generation to generation, And so I, as an adult, I learned what my father had gone through when he was a kid, so then he turns around and becomes the bully toward his children. But I was so aware of it, though. And it's probably because I was a very strong Christian. I was in ministry and I turned to God and I prayed for him. I prayed, God, teach me how to be a good parent. I don't want to repeat what I lived through.
So
and I wanted to break that cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you talk about breaking that cycle, what you said is so important. We talk about hurt people at Bullied, Broken, Redeemed. We say hurt people, but healed people help others heal.
Yeah.
And so when we can break that cycle, when we can take it to a place of kind of that generational roots, breaking that apart and moving forward, so much can happen in the place of healing. And I've talked to a lot of people who have experienced their parents were bullies, their grandparents were bullies, their sibling horribly bullied them, their workplace. How many people have actually been so badly bullied in the workplace environment, they're actually scared to step out or go for other leaderships, or they're terrified because they have been so badly abused. PTSD is serious. I talked to so many people who can remember vividly what their bullying was like as a child, the smell, the sounds, what the person was wearing, their face to a T, and it brings up really intense emotions.
Sure.
And so for us who can communicate that, it becomes very challenging for our children, our neurodiverse children, to really talk about that. Because they are struggling to kind of get those basics. When we add in all of these extra emotions to it, it can be quite a complex challenge for families to tackle.
Right.
But Cindy, I am sorry about that, because we're talking about as your dad, those formative years of growing up and what that abusive cycle can look like, and how it's something sort of like a lot of our kids in the classroom. You can't leave that. That's your dad.
And the difficult thing is that I look at all my siblings now and they're all so sensitive. We're all very creative, personalities, and just absorb everything. And the hurt was just so deep. I mean, I'm doing really well, and I, have been married a long time and have raised my kids and all that kind of stuff. But my siblings, no, they just, they're just so emotionally damaged, that it's,
So
it's a shame. So anyway, so this subject is very important to me, so
it's,
um,
it is. And
is
when what you were
I want to
talking
help
about,
other people. How do we get through this? How can parents help their children? For those that are, are going through the bullying still, or it's still just, a very close memory. How can they be healed of this? How can we help them?
well, so let's take one quick step back so we can really all be together on the same page, if that's okay, Cindy.
Sure.
I find so many people cannot tell me the difference between bullying and conflict,
Mm,
right? How many times do we hear, he's bullying me, she's bullying me, they're both, it's a word that's thrown around a lot. So I
mhm.
want to take a moment and just explain to parents and how I talk to kids and parents about, and leaders, right? Even in really top companies, how do we break this down? If I read you the definition, it's a whole bunch of words. And at the end of it, I don't think we get anywhere because you guys can all look up what the definition is. It's just a ton of words thrown in.
Mhm.
But the best way I can explain it to people is 3-letter term, an acronym. I use ARP. Is it aggressive? Is it repeated? Is there a power imbalance? You need these 3 components to have bullying. Is it aggressive? Right? Is it being repeated, or a really strong probability of threat, like somebody's life or something serious?
Mhm.
And is there a power imbalance or perceived power imbalance? If we have those 3 things, we are talking about bullying. If not, we may be talking about conflict. And in conflict happens all the time. You and I may not agree, right? I'm not going to agree with my spouse or my kids all the time. Conflict. And so the importance of teaching our kids conflict resolution skills is incredibly important. But parents, leaders, anyone out there, you should never use conflict resolution skills when you're dealing with a bully. And let me tell you why. Most people try to bring them together to talk it out, but bullying is not about conflict. It's regressive, it's repeated, and they're using their power to put the person down. When we're talking about conflict happens occasionally. Bullying doesn't. Conflict, both parties want to have a resolution and be in relationship at the end of it. When we're talking about conflict, somebody isn't ending up most of the time with serious emotional or psychological or physical damage.
Mhm.
That happens in conflict, right?
Mhm.
When we're talking about conflict, both people are willing to come to the table because they want to resolve the issue. They can talk it out. When you have conflict, you can use conflict resolution skills. And one issue that I'm seeing a lot of parents really struggling with is teaching children appropriate conflict resolution skills. But then on top of that, when do they use them? Because you should never use them with bullying, because it doesn't work, right? That person doesn't want to restore a relationship with you. They want to use their power over you to hurt you. It is abuse. It is one of the largest forms of child abuse we do not
That's what I
talk
was going to
about.
say. What's the difference between bullying and abuse? It's kind of the same thing in my
It
mind.
is. And so in bullying, you can actually, people use sexual assault to bully their victims. There's physical, there's relational, emotional, there's all kinds of things that can happen. It is a form of abuse. Where we step over into bullying, and when we're talking about like legal definitions for those who are going to be under discrimination, harassment, those type of things when we get into legally. But when we're talking about relationships, it's abuse. It is abusive. And I will tell you guys, if you have children out there who are struggling on the end of being a bully, please help them get that under control. Those kids have a much higher rate, incredibly higher rate of ending up with a criminal record in their early 20s. It is setting up children when children are allowed to bully from young. And there are a lot of parents, unfortunately, I think sometimes we have a serious bullying problem because we have a serious parenting crisis. Like, I know that sounds tough, parents, but
Yeah, but where are they learning it from?
right, it's just what it is.
Like,
And some
I
though,
remember who I heard talking about that just recently, and they're like, well, the parents are bullies.
yeah, but even as you mentioned in your situation, just because your parent was a bully, you may not be.
Right.
Or you may be a bully just because your parent was. It doesn't necessarily mean it was learned at home.
Mhm.
But I will tell you, how many parents now do you hear that snowball the way, making excuses for the kids, not holding the kids accountable, entitlement? All of that will grow kids to be horrible bullies. And our bullies, remember how I'm sure you've heard a million times, oh, well, they just feel bad about themselves. That's why they're bullying others.
Mm.
Big myth. a lot of these bullies have actually highly inflated egos in themselves. They use it in the classroom to kind of grow that higher social ladder. Our bullies can be really well at reading the classroom, nonverbal communication, manipulating the adults, very smiley to their face, yet a very different person behind the scenes. All of that behavior, when it's not caught by the adults in the classroom or checked, it actually creates quite a narcissist, right?
Mhm.
And then those kids are some of the hardest that I work with, because when they're confronted, they use a Darvo response, which you may have heard about that, where so it's people who are dealing with narcissistic relationships. When you confront them, they deny that they're doing it. They reverse it upon you and they attack you and blame you as if you're the one. It's like deny. So that's Darvo, right? Deny, attack,
Okay.
reverse. And it's like,
Got it.
oh, I didn't start it. They started it. So, and I'm like, oh, please, that doesn't work on me. I'm the bullying lady. Like, you can move past that now. Right. So, but they're the ones that kind of make my shoulders stiff out and the hair on the back of my neck stand up, because that child has been allowed to really manipulate a lot of people in their lives.
Mhm.
And guys,
I've seen children manipulate their parents.
all the time. And that's what I mean. These are parents.
yeah.
Parents, you better get a hold of this. One of my most requested workshops is, so you think your child's a bully, now what?
Mhm.
Right? And parents don't want to turn on the cameras. They don't want to know, but they know they've got this little like punk.
Yeah.
For lack of a better word, I don't know what to do with this
I've
kid.
seen it start at 2 years old with the screaming and the tantrum to get their way.
Oh,
And then,
yeah.
oh,
And then the
okay, honey,
parent,
what can I give you? Like, really? Come on, get a backbone.
you've got it. That's how we end up here. And when you talk about 2 years old, I am now doing workshops for parents on bullying for 2 and 3-year-olds, guys.
Mhm.
Like MOPS programs and young parents, our kids, little kids are learning to bully younger and younger.
Yes. And I say, when I see it, I'm like, this is a power struggle. This is, and I see too many parents have given the power over to the children.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yes.
it's simple little things like asking the child, what do you want to do today? Where do you want to go? Da, da, da. And I'm like, no, that's not,
You're
no,
the
I
authority.
tell my children, this is what we're doing today, because then it turns into, I don't want to go to school today. Well, no, you have to go to school today. It's like, well, I don't want to. And the parents give in. I don't.
Yeah. Well, and the part
It's
for
one
that,
brick at a time that
Yes.
builds up to.
right? But you have to start what you said is so important. Evil only bows to authority.
Mhm.
Evil only bows to authority. Children do not even see their parents as the authority anymore.
There you go.
Right? So when you and I, if we gotten called up in the principal's office, I would have freaked out.
Mhm.
I would have been a wreck to go home to my parents. The kids
Mhm.
now are like, whatever, because they don't respect that authority. We are losing the chain of command. We're losing respect for authority. They don't respect the parents. They don't respect the administration. They don't respect the police. There's a huge fall down. And so why do we have this rampant issue? Evil's only going to battle authority. You're going to have to find out who that child respects as an authority. And if it's not you as the parent, I might want to start there. But that's why so many times when we go to schools or we go to groups to try to help us, that child isn't respecting them either.
Mhm.
Right? So it becomes a complex issue, but I think that's why we have gotten in such a difficult situation. And I agree with you, parents, when they're little, but as they get older, you do start to kind of I wouldn't say step back as the parenting role, but you bring in more of a coaching role. You're trying to help them make the appropriate decisions, yet you're still the decision maker, right? We need to give them enough that they can grow on their own while they're under our homes, so that they're not out there flopping around, in college in their earlier years. But when we talk about bullying, I talk to lots of parents who are like, oh, I'm so glad I'm done raising my kids. My kids are now in their 20s. I don't have to worry about this. And I'm like, well, you might want to pull up a cup of coffee, because our kids in their mid 20s are actually our kids with the highest level of cyberbullying. And so many parents think they're done, right? I've raised my kids, they're done. Yet our kids in their mid 20s are having the highest level of cyberbullying issues, and they are struggling greatly with their mental health and being able to have somebody to confront it. It can be happening in their workplace, happening in the platforms that they're interacting in different groups, yet they don't always have that strong, especially if they haven't had that relationship with their parents, to get that feedback. And when they do call their parents don't know what happy slapping and flaming and posing and love bombing goes to. They don't even have the words to understand what their kid's trying to tell them. They're like, I'm sure this is important, but I really have no idea what you just told me. You could have said that in Greek. And
Right.
so it's not that they don't want to help, but how do you help what you don't understand? You and I didn't grow up in a digital world.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't grow up with somebody sending us a message at 11 o'clock at night. I hope you're dead and don't come to school tomorrow. We didn't wake up with, oh my God, we have to be, we didn't grow up with people making up boys' accounts to send us to try to joke us into showing up at a place where they've set you up that you think this guy you like is going to be there, and they videotape you and put it all out. We didn't grow up with your photo being thrown up on a website, hot or not, would you hit that or not? And then all the people you know in your peer group seeing that to see that you either have value or don't have value. That psychological damage, it's something that you and I we can try to empathize with,
Mm-hmm.
but until you've experienced it or see it, it's very difficult.
Yeah, my friend Diane, her 12-year-old daughter was bullied at school, and it was a lot of cyberbullying. It was a lot of that, like you're talking about, like you should die, whatever, everybody hates you, all that kind of stuff. And she committed suicide at only 12 years old. So
yeah, I mean, that was almost our story, Cindy.
Yeah,
my son had 3 attempts before I even knew. And not to scare parents, but I want you guys to hear this. I now have children 7, 8, and 9 years old with full suicide plans.
wow.
That come to us for help. Babies, guys, babies. The youngest I've worked with is 6. Not that I'm not getting them younger and younger, but serious issues. And as parents, they think they have time. Kids are sending nudes now consistently by 9 years old, right? We have a switch that there's this, we've got to get parents to realize that these things are happening younger and younger in our kids, and also educating parents on what to do, because like your friend, she may have probably known what was going on. 90%
Well,
will
she
tell
was
their
doing
parents
what
and
you were.
70% tell no one.
She did what you were talking about. Is she was going to the school, and she was kept trying to get the school to intervene and to help. And when she would do that, her daughter would say, "Mom, you just made it worse. You don't know what
So
you're doing.
that happened to
You
my
just made it
son. When we went to the school, and I tell people, don't run to the school first. Like, that's why I do so much parent training now, now that you know what you didn't know. I went to the school and I asked for help, and I thought things were better because my son wasn't talking about it.
worse."
In the reality, when his bullies were confronted, my son was jumped and stabbed and told, if you ever speak up again, we'll kill you.
Stabbed
In the locker room in a very prestigious, top-ranked school district in this country.
Right.
And was literally told, if you speak up again, we will kill you.
Yeah. Wow.
Imagine.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Right.
Are you going to suffer in the classroom? Are you going to ask for help? I mean, they've stabbed you, literally, guys. And I have kids who are sexually abused, not in a homosexual way, but physically sexually abused in the locker rooms. People don't talk about it because there's a lot of shame and pain that goes with that. And so parents, what do we do? That's really is my conversation. I think in order for us to change this conversation of bullying, the piece we are missing, we talk to the kids and we talk to the administration, we've got to bring the parents in. It's happening in our homes. It's happening to our kids. But I will tell you, Cindy, most school districts will not talk to me because I teach parents how to actually hold the schools accountable. Transparency, right? If there's an issue, like with your friend, how do you document the case? What do you do? What do you notify? What needs to be done outside of the school to protect the child before you even approach the school? All of these things for putting in a baseline, because when you approach them, you need to understand your child's life. Maybe it can be pretty difficult.
Right. I know my daughter, Denise, she wasn't bullied, but when she went away to college, she just wasn't happy there. My girls were twins and they just both went to the same school. And Denise was up there and every day she was crying. And she just said, "Mom, the more I'm here, the more I feel I don't belong here." And I'm like, just stick it out for the semester, And then she called me one morning. She says, "If I have to stay here one more day, I'm going to kill myself." I said, "That's it. You're done. Mom's coming tomorrow." I packed her up. I brought her home. That was it. Like, I just, as soon as I heard those words, I'm not fooling around. we're not fooling around with that. And maybe
No.
she's been melodramatic. I don't know, but I'm not taking that chance.
But the fact that she's gotten to that point to verbalize it, there's more going on there, right? Which is so many times I hear parents say, oh, just blow it off, or they need to deal with it. Kids that are dealing, and I know your daughter wasn't necessarily dealing with bullying, but our kids that are dealing with bullying and mental health crisis, parents, you don't even know really what to do. How do you expect these kids to say, tough it up? It's part of a normal school behavior, deal with it. None of that is okay. None of it is okay. And so they can't just be thrown into the ring and figure it out.
Right.
They need a game plan.
Right.
Gotta help them.
I think for me, when I was growing up, I always wished that somebody would step in and do something to help us as children. My grandparents, someone, please help us, step in and help us. We didn't tell anybody though what was going on, you know, they probably didn't even
it's
know.
like that silent cry for help. Right?
Yeah.
You just
And so I
wish
think
they
that's
could
why
see
there's
you.
a part of me that's, very, very protective, and as soon as I find out that that the child is hurting, I immediately want to step in and help. Let's do something. Let's protect them. Let's help them. That's it for part 1 of my interview with Candice. Be sure to tune in for part 2 to hear more of her work helping families of kids that are being bullied.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of today's episode. Be sure to join us again next time to hear the second half of the interview on Spectrum Perspectives.